Here in the dark, where the sound of crowds and chatter outside filled your ears, you pressed against the wooden walls of this tiny space, staring up into the dark, steely eyes of the man who invited you to this festival in a city you've always wanted to see. Tobio Kageyama was hardly a romantic, but the scene could not have been painted in any other way, cliché or not. It all started on the day you were admitted from the hospital, greeted and picked up by your parents, as usual, before you noticed Kageyama also waiting, albeit outside of the hospital. Introductions were made upon meeting him for the first time without a glass pane between the both of you, and to Kageyama's surprise, your parents knew quite a lot about him. It was interesting how it all turned out. Your parents allowed some time for the both of you to chat face to face, but with their supervision close by. Apologies aside, you explained that they were overprotective, but not overbearing, while the both of you reacquainted with each other, now exchanging phone numbers to keep in contact. That diagnosis of yours for a few months before the next possible relapse soon became an understatement. Between text messages, phone calls, and the occasional visit outside in town, you've had nothing but a clean bill of health. Minor problems arose when you practiced distancing with Kageyama. Even without the window separating the both of you, it still felt like it. However, it became a source of trust towards your parents on Kageyama's part. As Kageyama's graduation grew near, he wanted to celebrate with you outside of town, and after much convincing towards your parents, they allowed you to travel with him as long as certain conditions were met. You were surprised. Your parents allowed you to travel, and above all places, to Tokyo. The trip had run smoothly, but it grew excruciating that the both of you had not even held hands. You both sat a seat apart from each other on the shuttle, walked apart when traveling, and Kageyama had even booked a room where he advised he was happy to sleep on the couch. Everything according to the conditions your parents laid out was running smoothly. That was until now. The Sumida River fireworks were being prepped to celebrate before the both of you were trapped in a small space on the temple grounds. After tripping past fellow festival goers, a pair of old wooden doors jammed from disuse locked the both of you inside. Kageyama had tried to knock, or rather slam, against the doors for anyone to hear, but the volume of the crowd superseded the noise he was making. This was 4 or 5 minutes before he gave up. While passers-by enjoyed the festival's atmosphere, you both huddled in the small space with only the dim light of the festival's lights showered inside from the tiny window above. You peered up at the window, watching the night sky through it as well, before your eyes cast down towards Kageyama. To your surprise, despite the small space, he made an effort to keep his distance, with only the side of your legs brushed up against his, hearing him mumble under his breath about the situation.
"It's okay,"
you reassured him.
"At least we're not hurt. That's what matters."
"Yeah, well, how the hell are we going to get out if no one can hear us?"
he questioned, the frustration still laced in his voice.
"I'm sure someone will come by,"
you suggested with an optimistic tone. Looking around to find the small space was a storage room of sorts. Shopkeepers would eventually have to make their way here at some point, you thought to yourself.
"But hey, at least we won't starve,"
you jested, only receiving a soft glare from the young man. You chuckled nervously under your breath before you laid your head atop your knees, looking back at Kageyama, sitting haphazardly in his yukata. He had planned the night to take you out during the festival. As you had mentioned in conversation, you've never really seen real fireworks, only those on television, as you had been under house arrest due to your health. The night began fantastically with the assortment of food and stalls to visit through the temple grounds. But now, well, being trapped wasn't what anyone would have in mind for a night out. Kageyama sighed before he tried the doorknob one more time, shaking it to find that it was jammed.
Aside from me trying to bust it down, not much I can do,
he commented. You noticed a pout on his face, the telltale sign of his frustrations, but also of something else intermingling with it. You observed that reaction a few times before.
I'm sorry,
he apologized, following after his statement.
Why?
You asked.
I wanted to show you a good time,
he explained softly, as if it was against his nature to act in this way.
I never expected us to be stuck somewhere.
At least I'm stuck with you,
you added with a smile, turning your eyes towards the window.
And we'll just hope that if we are stuck here before they light the fireworks, that they aim them in that direction.
Kageyama watched you with what he thought he saw twinkle in your eye, staring at the small window that aimed towards the night sky outside.
How are you so optimistic?
He asked, while he continued to watch you.
You're just as bad as Boke and Nada sometimes.
What's wrong with that?
You answered.
Having hope can be one of the few things that I'd like to keep a hold on.
Realizing his words, Kageyama turned away, laying his head in his arms atop his knees and trying to submerge it from your sight. You saw something in his eyes looking away from you. Regret? Maybe for what he said? You had already come to terms with how people reacted to your health situation, but to watch Kageyama's reaction only fueled the heat in your cheeks.
Well,
he started.
Your optimism is one of the most wonderful things you have.
Thanks,
you softly spoke.
I don't regret this at all. This is nice.
Suddenly, a shiver ran up your spine while you held onto your sleeves, attempting to keep yourself warm, hunching your shoulders as a means to it. Traditional clothes were never meant to keep the cold at bay, at the very least during summer, but you couldn't rid yourself of this chill while you breathed onto your knees for some comfort. A warm brush of your arms and legs caught you by surprise, noticing Kageyama had shifted from the opposite side of the storage room and seated himself next to you. He lifted his arm, inviting you in, but not making a move himself.
Only if you want to,
he suggested, his eyes cast away from you with a small scowl on his face. He determined the choice for you, but it was yours to make, considering all the conditions your parents had laid out. You warmly smiled. The temptation was there. After all this time, you had never broken any of your precautionary rules that you've set up for yourself. But now, having learnt about Kageyama, being around him, unable to even hold his hand, the temptation was too great. You leaned into his chest, resting your head there and snuggling next to him. His body heat hit you like a warm blanket before you felt his arm lower onto your shoulder, rubbing it gently. You felt like you melted into him, clutching your hand onto his yukata as you continued to nuzzle your head into his chest, breathing deeply. You took in his scent and the cologne he used, feeling his heart thrum in his chest like a deep melody. You had never been this close with another human being before, and it felt magical. Kageyama looked down towards you, watching your every move, ensuring to hold you as if you were porcelain. He had been given the lowdown about your condition with your parents, the minute details on any onset symptoms, reactions, and the like. He had decided to commit it to memory, watching how you interacted with the world around you, as well as with him. To see you take that leap of faith and hug into him not only broke these rules, but it ignited something in him. He saw trust, and it only reminded him of that day he wanted to.
This is nice.
You purred, humming into his chest. Kageyama clutched onto your shoulder with a firm grip, continuing to rub against it, more so as a comfort for himself.
Yeah.
The whistle of fireworks echoed in the distance, causing your eyes to flutter open and turn towards a small window in the room. The colourful light of the explosions bounced around, but the explosions, the fireworks themselves, were not visible at all. Kageyama felt your shoulders drop slightly in his hold.
Hey, not the end of the world.
He reassured, causing you to turn back to him, still laying atop his chest.
We can see fireworks another time, baka.
For once, up close, you saw him smile. A soft, gentle smile crossing his features while the light of the fireworks mutely bounced on his face. Although disheartened, you looked away with a tiny frown, thinking too much on the reality of your condition.
Yeah.
You murmured, trying not to sound disappointed in your tone. The touch of Kageyama's hand on your head took you out from the feeling that almost welled up inside of you, until a gentle kiss was placed on your temple. You couldn't help the sudden wave of heat and nerves that bubbled in your stomach and up your back. The chill that was presently there dissipated into nothing. As soon as he pulled away, you turned to him, finding his eyes away from yours and that scowl still on his face. Despite the disappointment in not being able to watch fireworks with him, your smile returned before you nuzzled back into his chest. You didn't need to say anything, just like those countless times at the hospital window with him. You saw Kageyama as someone whose actions spoke volumes. While the sound of fireworks exploding and the crowd cheering echoed outside, you melted into his warmth, throwing caution to the wind this one time for the opportunity to touch him. Then the door creaked, the sound of it unjamming with a heavy pull from outside, catching both of your attention. An elderly man dressed in an apron entered the room, spotting the both of you huddled by some of his wares. He stared at the both of you confused, but was gentle in his speech.
Have you been trapped in here this entire time?
He questioned, eyeing his storage before Kageyama helped you up to your feet.
Sorry, sir.
He apologized.
Thank you for opening the door for us.
A chuckle escaped the old man's throat before he took a step aside.
Go on. You're going to miss the rest of the show.
Kageyama nodded, taking you by the hand and walking out of the storage room with you. While you entered back onto the street, alight with the blasts of the fireworks over the river, you turned your gaze onto Kageyama's hand gently holding onto yours. You were right. His large hand engulfed it, the warmth of it foreign compared to the cold glass pane that separated the both of you. He smiled as you stared at Kageyama's back walking through the crowd towards the river. He was right. There would be many other times to watch fireworks, but being in this moment with him, gently taking you by the hand, was one that you would never forget.